Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cheesycast, the sporadic artist online internet series podcast. I'm your host, Cheesymanfredo, aka Alfredo Morales, and today I'm here with. Uh, he's a webcomic artist. He's I think self-dubbed amateur biologist, and also he is just a big fan of just anything monster. You may know him as Bogleech, but here we are with Jonathan. And Jonathan, you go on ahead.
Um, Hi. I run Bogleech.com, which is just kind of started as just like a personal homepage where I liked to review things that I liked, and has since then kind of turned into like where I put up my own art and writing and webcomic and all kinds of stuff.
hmm I mean, that. I mean, that's smart, really, because I think you can't really trust too many social media sites with like your image. Not many places are very good like archive sites, so you gotta have your own website, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and yours dubs as like also it's more personal than like any kind of like Tumblr, really. Because
Yeah.
yeah, okay, just I'm gonna describe the Bogleech website for people. It's basically just this kind of old school kind of article site where Jonathan here, Bogleech, nothing just talks nothing but monsters of any kind, from cartoon, movies, shows, a lot of obscure things. He introduced me to a lot of uh, cool new properties and franchises I've never heard of before. And if you ever want to like expand your brain a little on monsters or creatures or just anything weird and gnarly, bogleech.com is the place to go. Right.
Yeah.
And I think yeah, that covers it. Jonathan also does Awful Hospital, Seriously the Worst, which is his webcomic series, and one of your main kind of like I guess thing that's like pulling in a lot of traction, right, is like mostly Awful Hospital, right?
Yeah, that's definitely the most popular thing that I do now.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's one of my favorite things that you're doing right now. Um, it's been running for like how many years? Like maybe three, right?
I think actually it might almost be almost might be more than 5 years now.
Oh yeah, yeah, it is. Wait, you're right. It's 5 years because I started reading it back in high school, and high school was like almost 5 years ago for me. Yeah, but anyway, I think that's what we just said right now. I guess a little preview of the bigger discussion that we're going to talk about. Um, this is actually our second recording of this podcast because the first one, the audio kind of got fucked, but this time I'm not gonna let that happen again, right? So I don't know if it sounds like we're trying to speed through a lot of things or like we don't have much to say. I guess that's due to the fact that we kind of already said some of the stuff, but we're probably gonna say new stuff in this one, just letting everyone in the audience know. With that being said, I like to go over with Jonathan the chronological order of your career on the internet. Like you're known for Bogleech, you're known for Alpha Hospital, but what was it like? I guess before that, and how you kind of transitioned into Bogleech and whatnot. If you could start there, I guess.
Um, I guess I just started out with a DeviantArt. Honestly, I just put my drawings up, and I really liked sharing ideas and sharing art with people, and then using its journal feature to review things or talk about my opinions on stuff. And um, yeah, eventually, I wound up getting a GeoCities homepage, which was like really popular at the time. Everybody had a homepage instead of like a Tumblr blog or a Twitter like they do today.
Oh yeah. If people still know what GeoCities are, they've been around for quite a minute online.
Yeah, but yeah, that I liked doing that so much that it just kept expanding until I had to start paying money for a real domain name, and that's how it became. It went from like geocities.com / whatever my username was to bogleech.com, and that I guess was when it felt like I was like doing something like really big at the time. Because I mean that was the big thing, was having your own actual website.
Right, right. So you you had to start paying for a domain. Is that because the site got like a lot of like attention? Is that when you have to start paying the domain, or
Yeah, back then, and this was before most people had anything but like dial-up internet. Back then, you could have like maybe like a couple hundred visitors a week before your website would be like taken down for a while and then like reset,
damn?
which is like ridiculous to think about now when we've got like, we all have like Twitters and Tumblrs that maybe like thousands of people might look at on a given week.
Right, exactly. It's gnarly. Do you know what was the first thing that got like the Bogleech website a lot of attention? You know, like in the beginning days. Like, do you ever figure out where all the traffic was coming from?
Um, well, the very first thing, and this is going to sound really really quaint by today's internet standards. The very first thing was that my little rinky dink GeoCities page was the very very first thing, no lie, on the whole internet with screenshots from episodes of Invader Zim.
Really?
Yeah, and in order to get those, I had a what was called a TV card. And the TV card was a device you could add to your desktop PC. I got it for Christmas, and it allowed you to hook like your cable TV cable into your computer and watch TV on this like really really terrible little fuzzy like 300 pixel wide screen. The audio didn't work either, so I would sit there and I would watch cartoons, and I would turn a TV on in the other room so I could hear them while I was like screen capping for my website.
That's crazy. That's very this card you're talking about. It's like, I guess, the granddaddy version of like a capture card that people use like nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gnarly. And so so you're the first person out there screen capping basically invaders
And
in.
Courage the Cowardly Dog, and Digimon Season 2 was running at the time, so I also had the Digimon goods.
Um, Kid, um, tell me if this is too much of a personal question, but like, do you know how old you were during this time?
Um, Definitely still in my teens. I mean, I'm in my 30s now. So this
Okay.
was like this might have been like, oh, I guess Invader Zim was like a 2000, I think. It debuted.
Yeah, it was early
I
2000s.
was yeah, I was there to screen cap the first airing of the first episode.
Oh, that's wild. So you were like, I guess, hyped to see Invaders Zim.
Yeah, I was already kind of familiar with Jonan Vasquez's comics at the time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Would you say that Jonah's like a big influence on you? Because it seems like he is kind of slightly.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Like I don't think I ever got into like where I would consider myself like one of his fans. I have liked a lot of stuff that he's made, and I definitely had a period where Zim was like my favorite cartoon of all time. Like like a lot of people back then.
Yeah, yeah, that's very that's very a common nostalgia kind of thing to be assessed with it. Invader Zim.
Yeah, but what was
Not,
really exciting to me though with the website was when I learned what ROMs and emulators were, so I could start doing video game content. And that was when I really started reviewing creatures and monsters by like putting up game sprites and stuff in these like galleries where I would review like
I,
every single creature.
um, I like those galleries. It's very it's like because so much game sprite art looks so good, but when you play a game, it's hard to kind of appreciate it in the moment because you're so like distracted with trying to beat the level or not dying, right?
Yeah, and I mean I
Like,
still do it to this day. Sometimes I'll review a sprite based game and put up all the creature sprites and stuff. But back then, that was also a really unique thing, and I still don't really see other people doing it. Where I just I would play these games for the express purpose of finding and analyzing every single enemy and boss. Like there were other sites that amassed all the sprites for a game, but that was usually just as a game guide or as a resource for people making their own games.
Right. Were you ever big into like those Sprite web comics where people just
I I read a bunch of them, although the only one I remember anymore is probably 8-bit theater, which kind of
right,
like started the whole trend.
right? That's the kind of granddaddy and the one that's like I think anyone truly remembers, right?
I actually have a I have I made a single guest strip when they were allowing people to submit them, and it's still up in their archive. But
Yeah, what a
back
baller.
then, I forgot to put my name on it.
Damn. So you were just like uncredited.
Yeah, and it wasn't even related to 8-bit theater. They just invited people to send in like any silly sprite thing they wanted to come up with. So I made this little comic that was like it was like a Shy Guy and a Sniffet from Mario 2, and they I think they rescued the Yoshi egg from Bowser's castle and then they ate it. Yeah, and I think at the time I was kind of thinking I would start making my own sprite comics, possibly with Mario enemies, but a lot of people beat me to that, and I kind of lost
Oh yeah,
interest.
that's it. That's its own genre at this point,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Um, yeah, that's cool. I, but yeah, I really do like the gallery that you have like of all the little sprite enemies because there's a lot of artistry in like sprite that's hard to appreciate when you're playing the game. I think I already said this, but I think a big example like now would be like it's a it's fun watching someone play like Cuphead because you could appreciate like the little moments, the little kind of like clever animation that they do
yeah.
like in
When you're
Cuphead. But when you're
playing, it's hard to focus on all that.
oh yeah, you're just trying to stay alive, right? So you can't really appreciate it, So there's like this kind of like um this is kind of like thing that if you really want to enjoy the artistry of something, you kind of have to separate it from the work. And I think your gallery is very useful for that. But wait, I want to go back for Invader Zim for a minute. Were you like reviewing Invader Zim monsters back into there, or were you just posting like images of it?
Yeah, I was just posting screenshot galleries, and they were only like maybe like 8 to 10 images per episode. But back then, people thought that was pretty decent content by internet standard, by '90s
I
internet
mean,
standards.
it would have. I mean, yeah, that would have blown people's minds back then. It's not like today. Like the moment a Steven Universe episode drops, people are already posting
Yeah.
the screenshots of every new character.
And gifs and memes and clips and just everything all
Right.
goes up at once.
Right. Exactly. You gotta like back in the day, you had to get what you can. Okay, so anyway, you become the Invader Zim guy. You become the Courage Cowardly Dog guy. What comes next after that?
And then I just focused on the game sprites a while, but then um I realized, I had always wanted to be a biologist, but I didn't really get that chance. So I just started putting up pages of biology facts. Like these were just like lists, like little short text lists of like, like amazing trivia about like insects
Yeah.
or parasites, not even like any images or anything, but those got really popular. And that's when I started really thinking about writing like actual like articles, like what people would think of as like a blog now about like obscure biology and natural science.
hmm Yeah. I that's kind of like how I first found out about you. Not through the website, but for this is gonna take people back for a second, but for like crack.com because
Mhm.
you did articles on there too, right?
Yeah, for a couple of years.
Did they like approach you about making an article, or did you email them first? How that process work?
Oh, they actually had um, open submissions for absolutely anyone, and they actually still do that. no matter who you are, you can go on their forums and you can get access to the writers' forums and pitch your article idea. It's just that it has to go through like a review process and feedback process, and then people will like approve it and like move it on to like another forum, and it's a whole kind of a whole long thing. It's gets pretty competitive, but they really liked my content early on before I kind of like ran out of ideas.
Mm-hmm. Did, so how many articles do you have on crack.com?
I think I got up to maybe between like a dozen and 20 articles, and they also were for a while putting up like some of my web comics and stuff I was drawing at the time, and some other stuff.
Yeah, I did remember seeing some of your like comics
Yeah,
posted on there once in a while.
it only kind of that only kind of wound down because for their articles they like them to be list format. They like you to have at least they're
Mm-hmm.
lucky to have at least 5 things that they will definitely use and a couple of extra when you pitch the article. So you actually have to write more and have more content than people will ultimately see. And they don't want any of those things to be anything that any other article on the site has ever used before. So, like if you're like me and you just have this like narrow area of interest and expertise, um, and you're competing with all these other people, you really quickly run out of stuff you can pitch to them. Because
Okay.
on top of those limitations, they want they want each thing to be like really shocking and exciting to like the average reader.
Right. You gotta like those kind of clickbait titles like top 5 bugs you didn't know are inside your body right now kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah. And yeah, but I mean luckily I was like, you were into stuff like that, right?
yeah,
you very big on all the bugs, insects and whatnot. So yeah, I think I found out for you for cracked articles and I then I found out about Bogleech because there was like a link there and the website seemed very interesting. I haven't really I honest to God, I never grew up with like GeoCity like sites. I think
mm,
I got into the internet like at the beginning of YouTube, right? So like remember like early YouTube when people would post like AMVs of like wait, give me 1 second. Okay, yeah. So remember like early YouTube when people would like post AMVs over like video game footage. Like that's when I first started getting the internet. You know.
yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't
It's
grow up like on GeoCity sites. So this looks all like unique to me, and I'm pretty sure like the Bogleech website hasn't changed that much, right? Because it still
yeah, not
looks
in
the
many
same.
years now.
What was that?
Yeah, not in a few years now, and it's a really weird feeling to realize that I don't know almost anybody else with just a website like that, with just a domain name. I just know people who have a big presence on Tumblr or Facebook or Twitter. And like when I was younger, it was just everybody, you had a website like I do, and I guess I just never stopped liking that the most for sharing my stuff.
It's very personal. Okay, I think the only thing that's changed is that you added like little logos at the top for each section of the website. I think that's like
Yeah,
the only thing that's really changed. Um, but it's a if for anyone who hasn't like checked out the Bogleech website, you could spend like a lot of hours just like looking around it because there's like little like surprises and he's got little things to click on. Like there's like a little squid here that you can click on and it takes you to a whole article about little arts and looks like little decorative squid decorations.
yeah,
And
that was one of my first like hidden like Easter egg pages, was just turning my real collection of squid and octopus stuff into this like silly little story page.
oh yeah, that's another big thing. You have this big expansive collection of like little I guess toys, knickknacks, just anything you like, really,
Yeah,
right?
I collect things and people gift me things, and I just kind of I just decorate my home, just kind of just blanketed in stuff, like layers and layers of stuff.
I mean, that's dope because you know, if you cover your whole, if you create some sort of specific kind of energy in your room, you kind of like that does feel you like creatively. You know, you're probably like always in Bogleech mode when you're
Oh
like in your
yeah.
room if it's just cover head to toe with everything you've ever made like an article about. You know.
Yeah, it's got so much Halloween stuff year round that I jokingly consider only one item in it to be the Halloween decoration. It's this one tiny little ceramic coffin with a skeleton inside. So
Nice.
during Halloween season, I open the lid so you can see the skeleton, and then it is officially Halloween.
Nice. Oh well, good to know. Basically, Halloween Town. Okay, so all right, so after the articles, you get on Cracked. What came after that? What was like I guess the next big thing that happened on the Bogleech website?
Let's see. During that time, I was doing a web comic that just consisted of a series of unrelated jokes. Like it didn't have main
Is it
characters or a main story.
Gagaday Gagaday comic?
Yeah, I guess I was mainly inspired in that by Casey Green with his comics like Gun Show and stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. It looks very gum show. Not gonna lie.
Yeah,
Oh
I was definitely going for a kind of style like that. Although um, when I look at most of those comics now, I think they look really really bad to me. Like I would do them so different now, but there's also still a lot of them that I like.
yeah, some of them are pretty. Some of them like are kind of classics almost. You know, like the was it the Maggot Fairy?
Oh yeah.
I like the
I
Maggot.
don't even know where that came from exactly. I just thought it would be really funny if there was a fairy devoted to uh, making maggots for people,
Yeah,
and
like it's
because not many people really want maggots. She's never really had any any customers before, and then like the final joke of the comic is also that for whatever reason, that's the only fairy that's real.
yeah, basically, right. People probably seen the Maggot Fairy around. I can't. Other than that, there's like other ones that I'm not sure. The other ones I remember. I remember the one where it's like a hallway, and there's this like weird guy like walking down the hallway. He's making some sort of noise,
Oh
and
yeah, that was actually just a that was an illustration of a dream I had had the night before. It was like really stuck with me, and I guess that dream wound up inspiring a lot of stuff in Awful Hospital.
oh yeah, that the hallway that he's in looks just like that one hallway between the zones, whatever it's called, the weird
Yeah,
corridor thing.
yeah, I wound up calling it the plank maze. Yeah, in the dream, this weird pale gray guy was just kind of like bouncing and dancing around in this decrepit hallway of rotten wooden boards, and he was kind of making like Daffy Duck noises in the dream, like kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
woohoo woohoo woohoo, and but then this something like off screen, something I didn't really see in the dream, bit his whole face off. But then he was fine. He carried on. He kept bouncing around and babbling, and that was like pretty terrifying dream. But I thought it was really cool too.
yeah. I mean, I dig stuff like that. It's very I feel like you're kind of like a little bit ahead of the game with the that weird kind of like it's hard to describe something like you know stuff like don't hug me, I'm scared.
Yeah, that I noticed like in just the last few years, like a lot of horror has shifted over to these kind of like kid show aesthetics and like really
Yeah,
goofy stuff. And even though it's getting kind of saturated at this point, I really do still enjoy that look and feel of like like googly-eyed Muppets and
Yeah, very
silly
kind of the
silly things in a horror context. Because that's honestly what that's what scared me when I was little. Not so much the stuff that was meant to be scary, but the stuff that was oftentimes meant to appeal to me as a child, and something just felt, just really wrong about it, really off.
this kind of like esoteric, surreal kind of horror, you know. Like, okay, so like, I guess an example would be you ever seen Eraserhead?
Yes, that is also a pretty big inspiration to some stuff I've done.
Oh yeah, not in retrospect. That's true. I think about like the scene where the main character goes to dinner with his I guess girlfriend at her family house, and they're about to cut the turkey, which is very tiny, and then the turkey's like legs start moving back and forth, and it starts like oozing out. There's like pink slime, and
Yeah,
to him, he's like the only one like kind of looking at it like all weird. Everyone else is just like doesn't care, right? Like it just feels
yeah.
mundane to them. Yeah, like that kind of stuff. I appreciate stuff like that where it's just something seems off, but people seem to like be like weirdly fine with it, you know?
Yeah, and I was actually, when I was a child, I was like incredibly fearful. I was terrified of everything as a kid. I
Same here.
thought some kind of danger or death was lurking around every moment, and that's the feeling I had. It's like everyone else, all the adults, they all seemed totally fine, while I thought, there was horror lurking just outside. And and yeah, just like you were saying, just this sense of everyone being fine with something, and like you feel like you're the only one who sees the terror, which I guess, now that I put it that way, that's probably why I identified so well with Courage the Cowardly Dog. That my life was Courage's life.
Yeah, that basically is Courage the Cowardly Dog, right?
Yeah,
That okay, what you just described basically sounds like how like certain kids react to global warming and other adults don't care.
yeah,
Like these kids are just seeing the world literally on fire, but all the adults are like, eh.
yeah. I mean, sadly, it's kind of like that with a lot of things. There's always like it's always like half to two-thirds of the world just doesn't really care about a given thing that's going wrong.
Yeah, that is kind of like the reality of it, you know. So like I guess there's like a lot of appeal to this like whole um you're the only one who notices like how kind of messed up or scary something truly is, right? While everyone else's reaction to it is like simple complacency or like boredom, you know?
Yeah, and I guess that's got to be a pretty common sensation. Like, maybe it'll be like over very different things for different people, but I think almost everyone has felt that way at least once. And I guess that's why stories like Candle Cove and stuff really caught on well.
Oh yeah,
Stories where like nobody else can see the anomaly that's tormenting you.
right, yeah. Oh, Candle Cove is like one of my favorite creepy pastas. Not gonna lie.
Yeah,
Um,
mine too.
okay, wait. Speaking of creepy pasta, you do So Jonathan over here, Bogleech, does this creepy pasta cook off every year, where people submit their own creepy pasta and you like, well, you rank them, right?
Yeah, it's like well, honestly, like the vast majority of them are fantastic. Like people really seem to go all out, like pouring all their creativity into these. Like every year, I'm like more impressed than the year before with what people send in. So, um, yeah, it's very very difficult to pick out winners and make it a contest. It feels almost like really unfair, but um, I guess the contest aspect is also what motivates people to put so much effort in.
Right. You must have like some spot for the runner ups, right?
Yeah, I try to I try to do a really good variety of winners and runners up every year, and I try to give prizes out, especially to new writers who've sent in really good stuff.
Yeah, that's great. I really do. I always dig it when people kind of like either make some sort of contest or something that like encourages people to make art. Because it's kind of like you're putting this energy out into online space. So in return, you get like more art being produced, right?
Yeah, and the first time I did it, I really didn't know what to expect. I just thought, well, hey, maybe it would be kind of fun to run like, like a little contest to send some scary stories in. And I thought maybe I would get like 30 or 40 of them, and I got like 300 of them
Oh,
from
jeez.
people. And yeah, so like every year it is usually like somewhere between 1 and 400 entries.
Is it is it just you like reviewing every entry? You don't have like any
Yeah,
support?
yeah, at first I was actually reading every single one all by myself. Um, now, my spouse actually reads them out loud to me while I work on other stuff because that is the only way I'd be able to get anything done.
Yeah, I feel it. Yeah, well, that's dope. How much do you say your spouse usually helps you out?
A very, very great deal. I probably wouldn't be able to get a lot of my projects done anymore without them.
That's dope. That's that's awesome. That's the shit right there.
Yeah, they can do art and especially like programming and coding and a lot of technical stuff that I don't know anything about. In fact, um, they basically coded the whole template that I use now for the articles and for Awful Hospital.
Oh, that's dope. So I get, yeah, to kind of, I guess, to make the website a little bit more easier to maneuver through.
Yeah,
Yeah, that is one thing that kind of changed. It's now easier to kind of move around, to go from one article to another.
yeah, and they also like if anyone is interested, they also have a blog like I do where they sometimes post their creative stuff, but they also post a lot of just the same kind of content I do, like cool sci-fi art and biology and stuff. That's RevRetch on Tumblr.
Oh,
Art
okay.
VRETCH.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll put a link to their stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, down in the comments because no one checks descriptions and videos anymore,
Yeah, hardly anybody.
right? Okay, so let's see. What we talking about the creepy pasta cook off? But what what are other kind of like big moments, I guess, for the website? I guess we haven't delved into this other bigger thing that you've been doing like on the side for like many years now, which is a mortishine.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you tell us about that? Tell us
Um,
everything.
yeah, well, that just started out as I I really loved, and obviously I still love monster games like Pokemon and Digimon and Monster Rancher and like all those other ones. So I really wanted to come up with a setting like that myself. And at first, all I did was I drew like maybe like a dozen little monsters and I put them up on DeviantArt. And I think at the time I called them Necromon,
Hmm.
like like horror Pokemon. And it was more of like a direct like parody of Pokemon where you were like resurrecting dead monsters and you were like making things out of body parts, kind of like Frankenstein.
Like
But
you literally make your own Pokemon, but like if you were Frankenstein, basically.
yeah, in the earliest concepts for it as a setting, you instead of a trainer, you literally were like just this a mad scientist who was like digging up corpses and like sewing them together into your monsters. But it definitely evolved to be a little more complicated than that. And like once the as soon as I started putting those up, they were getting a lot of comments and a lot of feedback and even some of my first ever fan art. So it's like I kind of immediately knew that this was a really fun thing that a lot of people would like me to continue doing, and I just kind of never stopped. It just kept expanding as a setting.
how many Mortashine monsters is there by now?
By
Would you
now,
say?
there is between 600 and 700.
Oh damn.
Yeah, I'm slowly catching up to Pokemon.
Yeah, you're almost about it. Pokemon's got like 900 now, right?
Yeah, not yeah, a little over 900, but um, they come out with less nowadays. They used to come out with 100 to 150, and now they're coming out with like 60 or 70 at a time every few years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I do still have a chance to. I think one
Catch
day
up.
I might have more Mortashine than there are Pokemon.
That's nice. the goal is to the goal is to have more monsters than Pokemon. That's
Yeah.
wild. Also, there's a soon to be a role playing game attached to this, right?
Yes. Hopefully, because the first time I said that it was coming soon was almost like 8 or 9 years ago. But
Mm-hmm.
but work on it really hasn't stopped ever since. It's been like almost like a decade of people working on this role playing game.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about like when they first approached you about making the game?
Yeah, I
How's-
had a friend online who he was really big into tabletop role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons
right,
and
of course.
hosting his own games and developing his own games. And he asked me, one day like, hey, what if I help develop an RPG out of this setting you have? And I was like, yeah, that sounds really cool. So we just kind of started fiddling around with ideas, and I would send him concepts I had for like the world and characters and all kinds of stuff, and he would start integrating them into this book idea. But yeah, the project kind of kept getting bigger and bigger until he had to get like some help on it, and we were like taking it more seriously as something to actually publish and sell someday.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it has been a long time, and I know that a lot of people who still follow Mordasheen are probably like they've probably given up thinking the RPG will come out. I know some of them think it's like dead or is
Yeah.
never going to happen at this point, but it's really just that it is going to be so detailed. At this point, it's like two people who are developing it, and I'm like just the art side basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they have like serious careers outside of gaming stuff too. Like the friend who first came to me is like a lawyer, so he is a very busy person.
Of course.
And yeah, he actually had to kind of like drop out and focus on his day job. But
Right. I get that.
yeah, but for the most part, a lot of the game is complete. It's just that they developed an entire play system instead of just lifting one from Dungeons and Dragons or something, and they are hoping to make a lot of games in the future using the same system. They really wanted to make something that could be picked up, a whole system that could be picked up and used by people for all sorts of RPGs.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why it has been in development for so long, because it's kind of part of an even bigger project than Mortashine alone.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a very smart maneuver. You kind of take like an existing property to kind of develop something new that can be used for more games, right?
Yeah, and
Uh,
what's funny is it's been long enough that for a little while they kind of thought maybe it was too late to market a new RPG. Like people weren't really talking about tabletop role playing anymore. It seemed like it was kind of dead. But then, like in the last couple of years, there were all these, like what's it called? All the podcasts and stuff that play D
yeah,
and
yeah, they
D
do like
gaming.
there's this big fandom now for like tabletop games. Like they kind of made a comeback, right?
Yeah, it all surged right back, like right in the nick of time.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. You just you got lucky, you know. Like
Yeah,
let let's just hope it doesn't die like by tomorrow or something, right?
yeah.
Yeah, but I think that probably has something to do with like tabletop games are like there's something very affordable to get into, you know.
Mhm.
Like doing stuff outside with your friends could get very incredibly expensive, but like a tabletop game that's pretty cheap. You don't gotta go anywhere. You can just stay at home, right?
Yeah, plus you don't necessarily have to, everybody playing it doesn't have to spend a whole bunch of money. You just need at least like one person with access to the right book, basically.
Right, exactly. Um, and you know, if you ever do want to spend that money, there's little accessories, little figures and whatnot, or you just make your own. You know, it really does invite this kind of more artistic kind of side, right?
Yeah.
Although it looks like with yours, I think you got all of the art covered.
Oh yeah, I finished the art for the RPG book a few years ago, but um, I'm always learning, better methods of coloring and shading and all that. So like, while they're still working on the rest, I do like go back a little bit and like keep touching up some of the illustrations.
Yeah, I see that. You used to have the majority of the images for the creatures in black and white, but you seem to go back and like remake them in color. You know.
Yeah, a lot of people still like vastly prefer my black and white pencil drawings, and I don't blame them at all. I think that they are really nice looking in their own way, and there's aspects of that style I can't really capture the same way digitally in color. It's just that like after a certain point, my pencil work on on paper wasn't really evolving or improving anymore. So
Hmm.
it's like I felt like I had to like move on to something new, and like I knew I would be like kind of starting over once I switched over to doing, all digital color. It wouldn't be that great at first, but it's just I think it's definitely also kind of improved at the same pace.
The black and white drawings for the Mortician creatures kind of look like they look like old school kind of like booklets that have like the pictures of the monsters you fight like in a game or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
It has this very kind of like uh maybe like kind of almost 80s kind of like black and white little booklet or manual with the names of the monsters kind of energy, you know.
Yeah, a lot like definitely one of the most inspiring things I ever had in maybe my whole life was just the original like 1970s 1980s Dungeons and Dragons monster manual,
Hmm.
which when I was really little I had no idea what the game was. I just had this book full of monsters with all these stats and weird game lingo. It was just this really weird mysterious thing I found at a thrift shop.
Right, right. I always loved reading. I always loved reading that when I was like younger, like just looking for the monster manuals. I never really got a good chance to play Dungeons and Dragons, but I really just like looking for the monster manual, reading like the lore about the monsters, or just seeing like what kind of weird gnarly designs they had.
Yeah, that was basically like a whole hobby of mine in itself. Like I didn't have any like gaming friends, or for that
Yeah.
matter I basically didn't have friends in general as a kid growing
Oh,
up.
oh
I lived
yeah.
like kind of like out in the middle of nowhere, but I I loved, I absorbed myself in like books and art and media, and like one of my favorite things in the world was to go to bookstores like Barnes and Noble and just browse through all of the fantasy RPG stuff, particularly the monster books. And I would like bring like my own like sketchbook and pens and pencils, and I would like sit there sometimes like all day long. Like my parents would just drop me off at Barnes and Noble to just sit there and draw monsters out of all these fantasy books.
I I feel it. I used to be very big on going to the library. Not anymore because I just been incredibly busy all day, you know.
Yeah.
Um, what I do like about Mortashine and how it ties back to the whole Bogleech website is it's very because you spend a lot of your time like looking at monsters, talking about monsters, and then like you read those articles, and then you like uh look at the Mortashine monsters, and it feels like it feeds into each other, you know, like there's
Yeah.
like some sort of connecting thread between every little thing you do on the site, you know, right?
Yeah, there's definitely certain like themes and I guess aesthetic styles that I always keep coming back to, both in my favorite things to review or read or watch and all the stuff that I draw.
hmm And like yeah, even when not just like monsters, but like when you have like your animal articles, you know,
Yeah.
like you see stuff that you talk about. Yeah, like you talk about certain elements that you like in monsters, and then you see that reappear in the Mortashine designs. You know,
Hmm.
it's like I guess it's like a look behind the curtain, a behind the scenes, you know, of the artwork itself, right? And what kind of like design philosophies you're following. You know, that does this whole kind of like I could just describe it as bog leech. You
Hmm.
know, like it's bog leech energy. You know, when I see like sometimes I look at a monster and I'm like, oh that monster looks very bog leech, right?
Yeah, it is a lot of fun when people will send me stuff kind of all day, like on Tumblr and stuff, just stuff they saw that struck them as something I would find interesting, and that does also often like fall under the kind of like the same kind of visual style as the stuff I do. So yeah, I guess there is a distinct look and feel to all the things that I'm interested in. Although it's kind of can be kind of hard to define it for sure.
I mean,
I
I
guess the
feel that
biggest thing is that I kind of just like things that are kind of I don't know. It's like obviously I like things that a lot of people think are gross or ugly, but it's like I don't really see them that way. I just think those kinds of features are really charming, and I at the same time I like a lot of things that a lot of people think are kind of stupid looking, like the big googly eyes on like a tentacle monster.
oh yeah, I think googly eyes are very underappreciated. You know,
Yeah,
like
it's like monsters in a lot of media. They try to look really tough and really fierce and sleek and angry looking and stuff. But it's like when you look in nature, like the vast majority of predators and stuff in real life are just like really goofy little fat squids and slugs and weird carnivorous worms with eye stalks and stuff. They just most dangerous creatures don't really look that badass, to be honest.
right, exactly. Like a lot of poisonous animals are very colorful. You know, they
Yeah.
they have this weird kind of charm, allure to it. You know, like yeah, animals like I I feel like a lot of like monster designs you see like in movies nowadays are very kind of like boring. They're pretty plain. You know, they're too scared to like to add color to a monster. You know,
Yeah.
like monsters don't have color anymore, which is a shame.
Yeah, I mean, you look in real life, and we got even the predators that people think are cool and badass have they got like fluffy ears and tiger stripes and stuff. They're
They
not
look
all just
They look
yeah, they're
adorable.
not all just gray blobs with fangs.
Right, exactly. There's this kind of I don't know if you ever noticed this too, but ever since the movie like Cloverfield, all monsters kind of look like the Cloverfield monster.
Yeah, I absolutely have noticed that. There's just clover fields everywhere.
Right, like they all have the arms, like they have the big arms, right?
Yeah, which were cool, but it's like now they're all doing it.
Right, exactly. Like every single monster has that. One recent monster design I did like though was did you see the last Godzilla movie, the last American one?
I'm still meaning to.
Okay, well, there's like a background monster that's like a mammoth. It has like a mammoth's head, and the
Hmm.
trunks are just like massive, but it also kind of has like gorilla arms, right? And I
Hmm.
thought that was very interesting. That it seemed a little bit more out there because every other monster in there was like giant spider, giant lizard, um, giant moth. You know, it's all very samey, but there wasn't anything too out there except for I guess that mammoth creature. You know.
Yeah, I think I know the one that you're talking about because yeah, I think I've seen some screenshots of it, and it is pretty cool and feels a lot more like the kind of monster that Toho Studios itself would make for like the Japanese Godzilla films, because
Right.
those have a much more memorable variety of giant monsters than yeah, like you're saying, like what the American side is turning out.
Right. Exactly. There's this whole kind of there's this whole thing with American, not just monster movies, but they do this with the superhero movies too, where they're kind of scared to look silly. You
Yeah.
know, they want to be as realistic as possible. They want people to think this is realistic, but to make everything realistic, they'll just cop out for just boring designs,
Hmm.
right? Instead of the more kind of sillier ones, which is strange because we're 10 years into Marvel movies. We had a character who has this bright blue outfit with a letter A on his forehead, which looks incredibly ridiculous. But they're still scared to add a little bit more silliness to their characters. You know?
Yeah, I was honestly really surprised when they made the Deadpool movie and he actually looked like Deadpool, because
Right.
I was so used to these terrible Hollywood redesigns of everything. Like they just it's like nobody making these movies for the longest time was thinking, the fans of this want to see that on a movie. They don't want to see this new goofy thing with all this extra metal armor put on it.
Right, exactly. I think a recent example of a design that was just kind of very bland. I don't know what they were thinking. Was in the Black Widow trailer, they showed Taskmaster. Do you know who Taskmaster is?
I think I'm.
He wears a hood. He has a skeleton face. He has
Oh,
a
okay.
sword. Yeah. So they showed him in the trailer, and he looks like he's all black, and he looks like he does paintball. He looks nothing like Taskmaster.
Yeah, look, he looks more like yeah, in the comic he's just he's a skull guy. You can't go wrong
Yeah,
with a skull guy. In the
he looks like
trailer
a
it looks like
pirate.
they gave him yeah, they made him look kind of like a yeah, like you're saying, like a paintball guy, but kind of like with a Mortal Kombat suit sorta, and he's got just kind of a
Right.
mask that's just almost a skull.
Almost right. Exactly. They're so damn, they're just so scared to oh, the cool badass character wouldn't have a skull mask. No, yeah, but then he wouldn't look like the cool badass character we know him as. You know?
Oh, I gotta say, while we're still on this subject, I think the very worst, hokiest example of that has to be um, that first Spider-Man movie in the early 2000s when it had the Green Goblin,
Yeah.
and and the Green Goblin's mask was this metallic motorcycle helmet goblin head that was never explained. There was
Um.
no reason for it to look
That
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 way.
that is true. They never explained why he chose goblin motifs. He just kind of oh, I'm into goblins.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I would not find it unbelievable or unrealistic for him to just grab a cheap rubber Halloween mask, which is basically what he did in the comics.
Right. Did you ever see the behind the scenes where they had that prototype animatronic face that they were
Oh,
gonna
I
go
don't think
for?
I did.
Oh, that's yeah. Look, it's yeah, Spider-Man, Sam Raimi. They're originally gonna go with an animatronic goblin face, where it moves and everything. It looks pretty good. Um, I don't know how I'd feel about it though, because to be honest, the first Green Goblin looked like the kind of almost like a Power Ranger kind of tokusatsu kind of outfit that the Green
Yeah,
Goblin wears. I dig that. I really like that a
yeah.
lot. I'm so used to like Common Rider monsters who have just a face and fangs, but it doesn't move. It's just a gaping mouth the whole time. It's like a
Yeah,
mask, right?
it is a very cool aesthetic, even though it didn't make any sense in the story. It is cool looking.
Right. And I mean, the whole movie, I think it's fine because the whole movie itself is very cheesy, which is why I like it.
Yeah.
It has a lot of memorable moments. I I don't feel that at all with any of like the newer Spider-Man movies. I think they just they're too scared to go like cheesy, even though he it's a spider themed superhero. We're like watching fight these other guys. Like it's supposed to be ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, it's like the only superhero movies I've really enjoyed in many years um have all been either like partial comedy ones or ones for younger kids, like especially all the animated ones
I
like
I
Lego Batman and Spider-Verse, because they're not afraid to really get as silly and colorful as these characters were kind of made to be.
right. I Yeah, Lego Batman is unironically like my favorite Batman movie.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah, because like I mean I don't hate the Dark Knight. Like I like the Dark Knight and everything, but the thing is like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much like tactical military stuff you give to Batman. He's never gonna be realistic. Not even like the Nolan movies were that realistic. Like in the first one, he was trained by ninjas. Like
Yeah.
yeah, you can't like at the end of the day, this is a guy in an animal costume fighting crime.
Yeah,
This is
it's
ridiculous.
still a goth furry punching people in behind buildings.
Right, exactly. Like the more realistic you make Batman, the more kind of like he seems like an asshole. He seems like a terrible person, really.
Yeah, which is another great thing about the Lego Batman movie, because they played up that he's kind of this
He's a
rich
jerk.
jerk, this man
Right,
child, but they also kind of made him ridiculous enough to be sympathetic.
right. I think one of my favorite lines is like in the opening like musical where Batman says, "Uh, who pays their taxes? Not Batman." I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty great. All right, so
Oh yeah, I guess we got a little sidetracked.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, so yeah, we got sidetracked. Back to Mortishine. Before I want to talk about Awful Hospital, but before we go into that, there's like a couple more things I want to talk about. Two big kind of things that you have like notoriety for
Hmm.
are a piece of your artwork appeared in the movie The Bay, right? And for the audience, The Bay is like a found footage film where this kind of like coastal town gets attacked by I think Jonathan, I think you could describe it best what they
Oh,
were being attacked by.
yeah, the tongue-eating isopod, the parasitic crustacean that lives in fish mouths.
Right. It's like this type of fish that keeps like their young in their mouth, right? And then
Some of them, these parasites go for all kinds of fish. There's actually many species of them, but they suck the nutrients out of a fish's tongue, and then the fish can use the parasite as a tongue.
that's awesome. Yeah, and so you made an article about that a couple years back, and you drew artwork for your version of the isopod, right?
Yeah,
And when you go to Google Images and you look up that specific like animal, your artwork shows up, right?
so there's a scene in this horror movie, The Bay, where someone is they're doing research on the parasite. So in the movie we see them bring up the real Google results, and my artwork is there. So yeah, during the production of it, they emailed me and asked me for permission, and they even they paid me $100 just
Nice.
for like one image appearing for like 5 seconds in this minor little throwaway moment.
That's pretty dope. You should probably draw more type of creatures.
Yeah,
well,
actually, that's a good point. If I keep drawing if I keep drawing more animals, maybe more movies will need to pay me for the copyright.
You're very incredibly good at like designing just creatures in general. Has anyone ever like approached you about designing something for like
Yeah,
a
actually, over the years, I've had a lot of people commission me or approach me to design monsters or creatures for their video game projects or other art projects, but so far almost none of them have ever been finished and seen the light of day. even though like in most cases I did get like I got paid and I finished the art, I finished my end of it, but you know, for every single game or film or anything that comes out, there's always like hundreds that just didn't make it.
I mean, that's usually how it is. You know, the you do something and then the project never really sees the light of day. Are you at? Have you ever like I guess posted what you've done for something that hasn't seen like the light of day before? You probably have,
Yeah,
right?
actually, I do have a few things like that on my Patreon,
Mm-hmm.
including uh for a while I was illustrating like different like mythological vampires, and that was for a book project that never came out. The one thing I did contribute art to that did actually come out was a video game called Crystal Catacombs on Steam,
That sounds
which
familiar.
yeah, it got really mixed reviews. Some people really enjoyed it. Other people thought the controls and stuff were difficult. But yeah, the guy who made that, he approached me to do like the official artwork for most of the enemies and bosses, and that was a lot of fun. That was actually almost like I worked on that for almost a year or two.
Oh, word. Yeah, it's got a mixed rating on Steam.
Yeah, yeah, but one of the within in that game to this day, because I contributed a bunch of artwork to it, there is an enemy in the game called the Bogleech, which is literally like a leaping, slimy green leech.
Word. What is there? I'm trying to see if there's what is the website to look at your art specifically for it.
Um, I guess I had a little bit of that up on my DeviantArt ages ago, and I have a lot of it up on my Patreon. Although I guess that's most, yeah, I have that up on Patreon as like a bonus for like the patrons and stuff. You know, I'm always looking for stuff to share with them as thanks that
Hmm.
feels like you know kind of like exclusive or something.
Right, right. All right. Well, hopefully, one of these days, you could post that out to the public.
Yeah, I probably will like pretty soon because it has been a few years since I actually did all this art.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I'd love to see it. Or if anyone in the audience member wants to see all that early, they could always become a patron to Jonathan over here at Bogleech on Patreon. All right. Okay. Okay. So let's see. The next big thing you're also known for is the infamous creepy pasta Day of All the Blood.
Oh yeah,
That was your work, and can you
yeah
tell us about?
that went massively viral like before I had any idea. Like I think yeah, I wrote the Day of All the Blood as a joke, along with a whole bunch of other joke stories that you can still find on bogleech.com. In fact, if you Google bogleech.com and the phrase ghastly macaroni, you will find all the original stories. The but yeah, that was where Day of All the Blood was first posted, and like maybe like a year or two later, it came up in a conversation, and I'm like I think on Tumblr or something, and I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I wrote that story, and suddenly I was like flooded with messages like you wrote Day of All the Blood, like I had no idea at all that it had become popular.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even, I knew I was a fan of your stuff, but I never even knew you were the one who did that. Because one of my friends showed it to me, and I thought it was really funny, right? But I didn't know it was you, and this is like during the time when I would like look at a look at Bog Leech on like my laptop at school, which is very interesting. And I think I told you this the first time I recorded this that in one of my short films, there's a part where like in the background you hear like these kind of like I guess demonic whispers, and you can't really hear what they're saying. But if you like if you what they're saying is one of my friends just saying day just reading Day of All the Blood, but we like he like just edit the audio so it sounds like demonic whispers.
Which does feel like a special honor to me.
Uh, Oh yeah, I'm glad you like it. Actually, that's okay. After this podcast over, I'll send you a link to it. I got certain short films you probably dig. Back before so I mean, what I do right now is I currently make comics, right? But a couple years back, I was really into making like short films, specifically like horror films, right? And I got a couple that you might dig. Maybe there's not. I don't got anything that has like any creatures in it really, but
Yeah,
uh,
I like all kinds of horror.
word. Yeah, you're a fan of horror, but like you like something very specific, don't you? Like mostly anything, I guess, monster related, right? Or like how we talked earlier about the whole kind of like mundane, esoteric, surreal kind of horror, you know?
Well, monsters are my favorite things, but I think many of my favorite horror stories don't even involve them at all sometimes because it's also kind of hard for me to find monsters scary, because I like them so much. Like, I see any monster and I think like, wow, that's a really cool animal. That's a really fascinating species. I wonder what that is. It's like, it's like monsters kind of seem kind of innocent to me. Even when they're dangerous. It's in the same way that like a shark or a lion or something is, it's dangerous, but it's still kind of beautiful to people.
Yeah, that's true. You have a very, I think that's how Guillermo del Toro talks about monsters, you know? They're more like friends,
Yeah,
right?
it's like I love monsters, but it often takes more than a monster to actually like seem really creepy to me in a story.
Where what do you think about Guillermo del Toro? He does like a lot of stuff. Are you into him? Would you say you're into Guillermo del Toro?
Yeah, most of the movies he's made that I've seen, I've definitely liked at least on some level to really loved. The ones I really loved were probably um, Pan's Labyrinth,
Yeah,
The
Pan's Labyrinth
Devil's
is good.
Backbone. I did love The Shape of Water, and I also loved his um, his remake of, I think it was called Are You Afraid of the Dark? I
Yeah,
think.
that was pretty. That wasn't too bad. I haven't seen the original. I
Oh, it was Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. That was it.
Yeah, I know in the monsters in his remake, it was they're kind of like little tiny, not not little goblin kind of creatures, right?
Yeah, it was basically a story about evil fairies, more or less. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
they were kind of modeled like these just wonderfully nasty little tiny screeching, scrabbling, like ghoulish little. I
monkey
guess basically
creatures,
like,
kind
yeah, basically monkeys.
right? Exactly. He has a big thing for fairies. Like the majority of his movies, I think, have like fairy-like creatures in them. Um,
Yeah, and I really like how much people in general are getting back into fairies, but there's a lot more awareness now that that fairies aren't necessarily just cute and
there,
silly. They're actually they were like a really like terrifying force
there's
to some
vicious
people.
fairies.
Yeah, and even the ones that aren't necessarily evil can they can just they can take you away. They can curse you. They're not something that you want to mess with.
Right, exactly. I think we have. I think the when Pokemon introduced fairy types, I think that brought back a little bit more. Maybe.
I'd say it gave them a boost.
Yeah, gave them quite the boost. Okay, cool. So speaking of fairies, this next topic has nothing to do with fairies, but what I wanted to ask you, what are your as an artist or just whatever, just what you do online? What are your biggest like influences? You know, and I guess we'll talk about art right now, but also later I want to talk about what are your influences for the Bogleech website too.
Um, there's so many, like I could barely start to count them, but I guess the biggest influences are definitely a lot of things that scared me when I was a child,
Hmm.
which was almost everything, like I've discussed before. But
Yeah.
it definitely also nature, of course, biology and real animals, and also I guess a pretty big influence on my style of like my visual style and the things I like are probably the kinds of aliens and monsters that were popular in the 50s, like quite a while before I was born, on like a sci-fi pulps and stuff.
Oh yeah, same here.
Yeah, that was back when people coined the phrase "bug-eyed monster" to describe them because most of them, like the most common feature back then for monsters in horror art was like it was huge bulging eyeballs.
Hmm.
And it's interesting that like nowadays people look at that and they just think it looks cute and silly, and we don't see it as much. But like at one time, people thought that was really scary. A thing with these big owl eyes just kind of staring at you, which I think carried over into a lot of cryptids and stuff like Mothman.
Or the Flatwood Monster.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait. Side note. But did you ever? There's this one video that talked about like what the Flatwood Monster could possibly be,
Hmm.
and this person came to the conclusion that it was most likely like an owl.
Yeah, which is funny because the Mothman has also been explained as an owl. The Chupacabra has been explained as an owl. The Hopkinsville Goblin has been explained as an owl. Some Bigfoot sightings have been explained as owls, and the gray aliens and many ghost reports have all been explained as owls.
I
But
think.
what I'm wondering is, what if there are just monster owls? What if there
What?
are just magical, horrible owls that like to do this stuff to people?
Yeah. Yeah. What if owls were the real monsters the whole time?
Yeah,
Which I mean, owls can be really freaking scary sometimes.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, in this one video they talked about how so the weird like head shape that the flatwood monster has, like owls have this weird like kind of defensive position where they put the wings back and it creates like that head shape.
That
Right.
does make sense.
And then I think in earlier reports it said that the flatwood monster was like green or something. And I think what they're referring to is that like I think it was a owl on a branch and below it was like a green bush that like in the dark it kind of looked like it was a body, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So anyway, owls are very underappreciated as the true monster of our society. You know,
yeah.
um, when we need
I
like
mean,
a
next, I mean, obviously, we're going to find out that the Loch Ness monster was just
as an owl.
a
Yeah.
submarine piloted by owls.
Oh god. UFOs in the night skies are just owls.
Yeah,
Just
space
really weird
owls.
owls. Yeah. Illuminati conspiracy. It's an owl conspiracy. It's a
Yep,
council of
every member of the Illuminati is three owls, and they're standing on each other's shoulders in a big coat and a hat.
yeah. They in certain if you look at an angle owl in a certain direction, it kind of looks like a pyramid with an eyeball. So gives it
Yeah,
away.
exactly.
Oh god, the deep state is made of owls.
All the way down.
All the way owls all the way down. But okay, so anyway, I think okay, last time I think I asked you this question about artistic influences. You mentioned a Bug Boy by Hideshi Hino.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Um.
about Bug Boy. I haven't read it yet. I was gonna read it before this interview, but I forgot. I was busy.
Yeah. Hino is an artist I found out about in I think as early as 2000. So he wasn't. It wasn't a part of my childhood, but it was still a really big nostalgic influence. And, I say that, but I mean, I guess that was almost 20 years ago now, to the year 2000. It still feels recent to me somehow. But
I
yeah,
feel
I
it.
found out about him like pretty early in I guess in my internet life.
Hmm.
So he almost immediately became an influence on my art because just like kind of stuff I was talking about. He does these really like these monsters and designs that are they're very dark and they're very like horrifying and disturbing by most standards, but They're also kind of cute. They're really silly. He does these things like creatures with huge, massive eyes and heads, and
Oh yeah. Even his like normal humans have like massive eyes.
yeah, and most of his monsters are, to some degree, they're sympathetic figures. Even when they're really horrible, even when they kill people, they're tragic and they're sad and they're hated and kind of in pain. And it's like I really like monsters that are sad and that aren't necessarily just evil.
Relatable.
Yeah, and the Bug Boy is like a brutally sad story about like this like abused child who he kind of takes solace in just his love of insects and frogs and creatures he finds out in the woods. He
Hmm.
kind of like escapes from his family to go like bug hunting and stuff, but he he gets stung by this weird bizarre looking caterpillar one day, and he starts mutating. He starts changing into an insect,
Hmm.
and it's honestly it's just kind of a horrible tale from start to finish, because it's just this kid is like dissolving and like turning into like a pupa, and then he emerges as this just giant grub with like a monster human face. And long story short, he ends up living in the sewers, killing and eating people, and
Oh
then he dies. And that's
damn.
the story.
Would 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 you say that the Bug Boy story is a very relatable story?
Yes, a little bit. In fact, kids did literally call me Bug Boy when I
Oh
was when I
no.
was in school.
Damn. Well, I do think of you as the Bug Man now. You evolved. You
Yeah,
metamorphosed into the Bug Man.
I don't mind. I don't mind people thinking of me that way.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this last time too. Like, yeah, I used to be like the Dragon Boy back in the day, but then I slowly realized, wait, Godzilla's better, so I became the Godzilla Boy.
He's basically a dragon.
Basically a dragon. Um, I don't know. I think you swayed my opinion a little bit on dragons because I think you in one article you talked about how your favorite kind of dragons are the ones that are more weird looking that don't look like traditional dragons,
Oh,
like
oh
the
yeah, the ones that like what's like what we think of as a traditional dragon now is like, ironically, it's like the much newer interpretation, like, because nowadays people think of dragons as these really big, really cool, really pretty things, and I do honestly like those. I do think I think basically all dragons are cool,
I
but
mean,
yeah, my favorites are like the in much older artwork. They were usually like small and dirty and tattered and just these little wretched things.
look a little bit like chimeras almost, I guess.
Yeah, they were like made up of like chicken parts and rat heads and
Yeah,
like torn up bat wings.
yeah, I like that. I like it when they're just gnarly like looking little weird creatures. I wish more works of fiction played about like how weird a dragon could truly be. Because even dragons, like when you think about a dragon, it's kind of like a fusion of different animals, really. And I think in the Chinese dragon, they really do that a lot, where they have like the dragon with antlers and like a lion mane.
Yeah, and I honestly do. I really love the way um, Pokemon does dragons, where in the Pokemon world, a dragon can be like of any possible taxonomy. Because they've got like a dragon that's a slug, a dragon that's two dragons that are seahorses. They've got a dragon that's a bat.
They got
Um,
they got a dragon that's an apple now.
yeah, a worm and an apple. I think that actually is my favorite. I think concept introduced in Sword and Shield.
Yeah, it also has like little kind of like snail kind of eyes that look kind
Yeah.
of droopy ears sometimes. Oh boy. But okay, so yeah, so damn, what was your first? I forget. What was the first thing you said you were influenced? Because I know second influence was Bug Boy, but what was your first influence? I forgot what you
Um,
mentioned before.
Oh, I was just I generally talked about like the old the pulp sci-fi
Oh,
bug-eyed monsters and stuff.
oh yeah, I love those.
Yeah, I had a big book as a child of just like old like astounding stories covers and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And like I didn't even know like it didn't have any of the stories with it. And to this day I haven't really had a chance to read most of those stories, but just the artwork alone was just really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I always did love those that artwork. I haven't read any of the stories. I have a weird feeling they probably do. They're probably very like old timey value kind of stories, though.
Yeah, a lot of them. I mean I have read a couple of them, and they yeah, they're some of them are kind of funny in just how different the attitude is.
Right.
I can't remember what it's called, but one that I did read was about a man. I think he was time traveling or something like that, and he encountered the last human on Earth who had evolved into this brain creature,
Yeah.
and the brain creature was not malevolent in any way. All it did was meditate. It didn't even acknowledge the guy. It was just a brain quietly thinking to itself. And he's so disgusted and horrified that that's what's left of humanity that he kills it. It didn't
Damn.
do anything, but he kills it, and he's still like the hero of this or protagonist of the story. Like it's kind of written like you're expected
To
to be
rip
like, oh yeah,
like to despise.
that thing sucked.
Yeah, it does suck. I mean, I wouldn't mind that we all just evolved into brain meditating creatures.
Yeah, what
That
was
sounds
his
pretty.
problem?
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty badass. Like, yeah,
Yeah, which also kind of it's same something like that is kind of a problem throughout. Like when you read like H.P. Lovecraft and stuff,
oh yeah,
oftentimes it's like a lot of the creatures aren't even that evil or anything. Sometimes they're explicitly not evil, but like the main humans in the stories are still they're so mortified that like non-humans exist basically. And I
I,
mean in some cases they're mortified that humans exist who are a little different.
it's kind of like maybe H.P. Lovecraft was kind of making fun of himself without realizing it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, because it seemed like a lot of the creatures he talks about they don't do anything that's evil. They just kind of exist, Like it's just that you look at them and then you like go insane. Like that's what's evil. But they didn't really do anything. It's not their fault. You looked at them and went insane.
Yeah, like how much would it suck for someone to like think you're so ugly that they lose their mind and then they blame you for it?
Yeah, that's terrible. I think I remember I did like a hot take on Twitter once where I said that other writers have done Lovecraft better than Lovecraft.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like there's like his stories don't really hold up that well to me.
Yeah,
Most of
same.
them. There's
I
a couple
agree.
that are still kind of good, but it's like other people have done a lot better with the themes.
Yeah, I feel like he invents a lot of very interesting ideas, but I feel like other people have taken those ideas and made them even better, right?
Yeah.
I think Junji Ito is a way better Lovecraft.
Yeah, honestly, he is that is it. That is the thing about Junji Ito. He does that like weird horror, that like surreal cosmic horror, like the
Right,
best of like a lot of people these days.
right, exactly. Like just when I think of like the most surreal kind of like Junji Ito stuff is the one where like the balloons that have people's faces that
Yeah.
try to kill the people that they have the faces of. Or I think one of my favorite Junji Ito story was the woman next door where it's that weird lady that she's made out of like those metal kind of like bar things that they use for construction, and she could extend her own body to be
Yeah.
longer. And what I love about Junji Ito that he does better than H.P. Lovecraft, because when people talk about H.P. Lovecraft, they talk about, oh, fear of the unknown. You don't know what's out there, right? It's also scary, ooh, right? But I think Lovecraft kind of kills it when he gives single thing out there a name, and he
Yeah.
kind of
And it's
explains
like
their relationship to everything. Like he kind of killed the whole unknown, right?
yeah, I guess like most of Lovecraft's things are they're just from space. That's it. They're aliens. We know what that is. That's not
Right.
incomprehensible. But something like Junji Ito's like Uzumaki,
He doesn't
that
explain
is
anything.
completely impossible to figure out.
Right. Like that's what I love about Junji. He doesn't explain anything. Like nothing gets explained. Like where are all these spirals coming from? Well, this doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it doesn't and yet it still doesn't feel like nonsense. It's just that you get the impression there is an explanation for these things. It's just not something that we get to see,
Right.
and that's how it would be in real life. In
Right.
reality, if you were encountering these supernatural or unearthly phenomenon, nobody's gonna like step out from the bushes and give you like a point for point TED talk on where they came from and what they
Right.
are.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what Lovecraft would do, like low key. Like all of them had like names, like Narlio Hotep or
Yeah, names and histories and
right.
genealogies.
That kills it. Lovecraft. It just doesn't become scary anymore, right?
I don't need to know the names of like all the monsters, great uncles and aunts. I really
Right.
don't.
Exactly. Actually, okay. So I think the only Junji Ito story where he explains it, and it kind of like it killed it for me. But I do still think the story is pretty good. The Melting Classroom. Have you ever read that?
Yes, that
Okay.
was that was real. That was probably one of his more messed up ones.
Yeah, that was like the concept is so interesting, but when like it felt very out of it didn't feel very Junji when he said, "Oh, it's Satan."
Yeah,
It was Satan the whole time. That felt
yeah.
very
It started out one of his more disturbing stories, and then suddenly he like just injected that into it, and that did kind of kill it. Even though, yeah, even though I will say it is still like one of his more screwed up, twisted stories, I guess. Even
if,
with that
I,
aspect.
yeah, I guess he just said he was Satan. He never like clarified what does he mean by Satan.
Yeah,
And, I mean, we do see Satan in the story, and like he does a pretty good Satan, but like uh,
yeah. It was kind of out of character for Ito.
it is. I mean, like I got nothing against trying something new. If he decides to write a story where like there's an expansive mythology, I wouldn't mind that, even though that feels very anti-Ito. But like when you've been in the game as long as he has, you gotta try new stuff. You gotta explore new avenues to tell stories.
Yeah, I
Uh,
know. I know the manga he's doing now. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, and I forget exactly what it's called, but I know it's actually more of kind of like a realistic psychological story about this one person's perspective on life with like I think mental illness, and it sounds very interesting, very different
that's
from his
fair.
usual stuff, but it does sound cool.
I think one story that has like a connecting thread, but like nothing ever gets explained is Tomy.
Yeah,
Yeah, Tomy was wild. That was a. It feels like a. It's Tomy's like almost like the anti slasher villain almost
yeah,
because she
like
doesn't kill anyone,
she
but
doesn't
she
kill
gets
anybody, but people kill because of her.
right. It's hard to describe, but yeah, it's this weird kind of like because she is kind of like a slasher villain where she keeps appearing in the story over and over again, but like she's not the one killing people. It's like this weird energy she has around her that does the killing for her.
Mm.
And yeah, Tommy's great. But okay, so you would say that Junji Ito is like one of your influences too, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first thing I read of his might have been. I think it was Uzumaki actually. Even though I found out about him from I think like just like a 2-page preview of Gyo.
Oh, okay. Gyo seems like up your alley. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's definitely I think it's my favorite concept of his. Even if I like Uzumaki a bit more, the whole idea of
Gyo,
the dead fish walking out of the ocean is like just really really imaginative and freaky.
it feels very. I mean, I'd call that very Bogleech core.
Yeah.
Uh, Yeah. Although Uzumaki, yeah, I feel that one's got a little bit more going on, even though both of them have very similar things. Like a small thing that happens to someone becomes this massive thing that covers the whole planet. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like Uzumaki, I still think of it as kind of like his defining series. I don't know if anybody else does, but it does
I
have like
do.
the most epic feel of anything he did, and there's so much that goes on in it, like so many different disturbing stories he gets to tell, you know, like the people turning into snails, and just
Yeah.
like the one girl who gets like entangled like a tree because her hair won't stop growing, just all this different messed up stuff with the same theme of the spirals.
Right. I I know they made an Uzumaki movie. I heard it wasn't that good, but I'd be down if they. I would be down if because it's like it's implied in Uzumaki that this thing happens like every 100 years or something. Like not specifically in this town, but oh, okay, cool. All right,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah. Sorry, just say yeah, just sending you a little notice.
oh yeah, no, I saw it. All right, cool. So yeah, maybe we'll cut the Junji Ito conversation a little bit short. Okay, let's talk about. We're gonna have to go through these last uh we'll do these two last questions, and then if we have more time we'll go into the other thing. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Awful Hospital. Tell us about Awful Hospital.
Okay, well, that was um after I kind of got tired of doing like just gag comics, just joke comics. I really wanted to try doing a web comic with a real story, like an ongoing story and a main character. And I really love interactive comics, like how Homestuck started out. Although I didn't
Right.
actually ever get around to reading Homestuck.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm probably never gonna read it, to be honest. It seems.
Yeah, there's just so much of it. There's just so much to get into and figure out. And I feel like I've probably seen most of the most interesting aspects of Homestuck already, like through other people, through like
Hmm.
the fandom and stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's like I really wanted to do an interactive comic because I've always enjoyed them.
Right.
And I kind of expected it to just be like a 1 to 3 month little like mini project, but like the response to it was so big and so many people got so into it that it um, just kept expanding, and I really I really got the chance to like explore, you know, character writing and like expanding a whole world for people like as it goes along.
Hmm.
And yeah, the whole theme, you know, for people who aren't familiar with it, is this woman named Fern wakes up one day in a hospital, and she doesn't know where her child is. She has an infant son who she last remembers being very sick, and the hospital turns out to basically be like not of the Earth we are familiar with. It's kind of like it's an other, not exactly an other dimension. It has kind of its own explanation I came up with, but yeah, basically it's got a staff of weird monsters and all
Monster
kinds of
people,
strange things going on.
and she's like new to it, so we're reacting to everything with her about how just strange everything is. But everyone who lives in that world, it's like mundane stuff to them, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of inspired by the fact um, that every horror game always has to have a hospital level, basically. Like, you know, Silent Hill, and you know, even like Resident Evil has had uh, hospitals featured, and just, you know, the screwed up evil hospital became such a cliche. I started thinking one day, like, well, what if the evil horror hospital was like a biome, like an ecosystem with its own, like, you know, species and rules.
hmm. Hmm.
So it just, yeah, so it just and that's why it's just called Awful Hospital, because what it is, just about a really awful hospital.
This terrible place.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I do like the name Awful Hospital. Seriously, the worst. But and I've been reading it like even back in like high school, and I really digged it. Um, how I read it though is like I kind of wait for a couple of updates, and then once there's like a good handful of updates, I go through them and like just blast through them. I guess, right?
Yeah, I love when I find a new webcomic that's already finished and I can binge read it for days. That's incredibly fun. But if it's still running, it's like you binge read it, you get really into it, and then you hit the end, and now it's like it's never the same again when you just are getting these little tiny updates one by one.
That is true. Some comics like are better like if they release kind of like it in chapters than
Yeah,
than one page at a time, because some stories are kind of like one page a character is just walking, page two a character walks some more, right?
yeah,
It really does like lose your interest really quick. But what I like about Awful Hospital is how it's kind of like it's like a comic reacting to you, you know, because you interact for the comment section, right?
yeah,
Which is this whole thing in the comic where like she's getting these voices in her head, which is just the comment section telling her what to do, right?
yeah,
Yeah, and so like if you were to get into it and you put in like a reaction, you gotta like wait for the next update to see if your reaction came through, you know?
yeah. And I'm not sure how much it comes through, like how much more influence the comments have, because like even besides like people directly suggesting what they think Fern should do, I do like I pay a lot of attention to just what people seem to find interesting, like if there is like side discussion of certain details, or um if people are responding a lot to one thing over another. I'll usually try to like just shift the comic more towards what people are responding to. So I like all the comments together are kind of like it's kind of like they're like a compass for like the writing of it. And I think if it hadn't been interactive and I hadn't been doing that, it would be like a totally different, unrecognizable story, like a different
Yeah,
world, different characters. Everything would have gone down a totally alternate path.
it probably would have been a lot shorter too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but I mean that's what I like about Aqua Hospital is like it's you expand the world, you know, like you interact with the world, and it isn't like a exposition kind of way. It's kind of like you yourself are going out there and looking for the exposition. You know, it's not like the exposition comes into the story and just breaks everything. You know.
Yeah, although there are some people who feel like it does, like I do have too much world building and too much explanation within the comic itself. And I guess I kind of agree, because I do have a tendency to ramble, and I that kind of ends up coming through in the characters themselves when they start talking about like how their world works, and all that stuff. I try to kind of cut that down a little bit more though lately and keep it like a little more mysterious.
Yeah, and anyway, when it's all over, you can finally drop the lore book that has the complete details of how the world works. You know.
Yeah, which bit by bit I kind of have some of that going on already, because there's a lot of there's a fair chunk of like short stories and stuff I've written that also tie like right into the setting. And especially some people missed it on almost any given page of Awful Hospital is a little button that says library on it under the navigation buttons. And if you click on that, it has all the peripheral material I've made, like extra little side stories and files and stuff.
Yeah.
Some of which do go into a lot of long-winded detail, like on exactly how the universe works from like the
Hmm.
perspectives of some different characters.
Hmm. And yeah, a lot about how the world works is like perspective, right? Like how certain characters see the world, right?
Yeah, a major idea of I guess the universe in which Awful Hospital takes place is that is that everybody in existence is living like they're in literally their own world. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, so like two people in the same room are seeing like totally different things and hearing totally different things,
Hmm.
possibly. But they're still somehow able to interact because all those things kind of like they kind of overlap each other just enough.
Right, right. And also another thing is how much Awful Hospital is tied to the Bogleech website because like I said earlier, like Mortashine is very much tied with a lot of the articles. Uh, a lot of the articles are also tied with Awful Hospital because you do see a lot of things reoccur that you talked about in articles happen in Awful Hospitals, or in the background you'll have like little Easter eggs to monsters you talked about in previous articles and whatnot.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, which is why like to read Awful Hospital you have to go to the Bogleech website. You know, because it's pretty much it's tied to it. You know, it's like the articles are like what's it called,
Yeah, I
supplement reading.
definitely, yeah, I definitely design it to work, even for people who don't read the rest of the site. But people who do read the rest of the site will definitely catch like a
Yeah,
lot
they
more little jokes.
yeah, they get a lot of more out of it, which is great. Which is something I really do love about it. If I had one criticism that I want is I want like an abridged version of the story, or like an abridged version of every like kind of chapter, because sometimes because how I read it, like it's very easy to lose track, and then I'm not sure where exactly was like the last thing I read. You know?
Yeah, and to be honest, at this point, I've introduced just enough characters and details and loose threads that I also lose track of them and
Oh god.
kind of forget some things, and I've got to like search through my own comic and make sure I remember something correctly. So like um, at this point, I plan to kind of tighten it up and stop introducing so many new elements until I've really done something conclusive with all of them.
Right, right. Um, yes, that'd
But
be very
I do
helpful.
have sorry to interrupt there,
No,
but
go ahead.
yeah, it's like I do have like plans for like almost everything people probably hope I have plans for in the comic. Like there's definitely like it probably seems really chaotic right now with a lot of stuff going on, but
Mhm.
there is a definite reason for all of it, and there are ways that lots of seemingly unrelated things in the comic are eventually planned to kind of like come together into this one big revelation.
Mhm. I mean, I feel it. That's what it seems like it's going. You know, no pressure. I hope it doesn't disappoint.
Yeah, now that I've built it up, it's probably going to disappoint at least some people.
uh, yeah, yeah,
It
like
happens.
yeah. I hope it's not like it turns out her real son was a friend she made along the way. You know.
Yeah, and yeah. No, there's definitely not going to be any any dumb stuff like, oh, she's just in a coma, or
Oh
oh,
God,
it's
I
just
hope.
all a
Oh
dream.
man,
It's yeah.
that'd be terrible. I would legit be mad.
Like if I was reading a comic for that long and it had that kind of twist, I would just like throw the computer across the room.
Yeah, exactly. Just for a coma.
Of
Oh
course,
God.
early on in the comic, that was like the leading fan theory was like, oh, it's gonna turn out she's
Well,
imagining all this.
it seems like that's what it was. Like even now, like you could like if it was all a coma, it would make sense. But it's not something I want,
Yeah,
right? Like it wouldn't be weird if everything was just a coma. It wouldn't like the story wouldn't really change that much. Like oh, and all the characters she met were people in her real life, right? Kind of stuff. But
Fortunately, fortunately within the rules of the setting, even if she was in a coma, all the stuff she'd be seeing would still somehow be real.
oh yeah, because different the way perspectives and whatnot,
Yeah.
how you see the world, right? I like that. I really do fuck with that idea. Um, damn. So you stopped your Gag a Day comic to do the Awful Hospital, right?
Yeah,
Um,
well, there was maybe like a year or two gap in between too.
yeah. Is it because did you feel like the Gag a Day wasn't that fulfilling to do?
Yeah, it never felt all that. It never felt as fun to do as Awful Hospital wound up feeling, and it never hooked people in. Like it never really got a lot of feedback, and
Sure.
I know exactly why, because it was very the humor of it was usually very obtuse and very odd, and a lot of people didn't get the jokes. And even when I look back on it, sometimes I'm like, what was this about again? What
It's a
was this joke
joke.
supposed to be?
Yeah, yeah. I feel it. Um, I guess I was in a similar situation. Like months ago, I had my own web comic that started out as a gag a day, but then I thought, it'd be funny if I had a plot, right?
Hmm.
And I was kind of doing that. But I guess what made me change from stopping this comic was mostly financial incentive,
Hmm.
because the comic was getting a lot of traction and it did make me money for Patreon, but not at the rate that I would prefer.
Yeah, because it does take a lot of time out of your life to do something like that.
Right, exactly. Like you think like Hussey was making a lot of money for Problem Sleuth, I think the real money came in once Homestuck was first gaining its traction, right?
Yeah, and it's like you really can't you really can't do a project that intensive, unfortunately, without real life security,
Right,
without a source of food and a home and everything, so that you have the time to
right,
safely devote to working that much on something that's just fun.
right, exactly. Because I mean, I like doing my previous comic, but like, and I actually do have like in my head, I have 4 years worth of like story material, but like nothing is really incentivizing me to keep doing it.
Yeah, and that can also I find also be like a just an often like a creative issue, because I have a lot of ideas for other comics and series and have had a lot of ideas for them in the past, but it's like sometimes I can come up with something that, like, every single element is something I find really cool and really interesting, and I still can't bring myself to start it or feel like really enthused to do it.
I feel it. Are you the kind of person that kind of does stuff more on a whim?
Yeah, it's definitely hard to really like plan ahead usually. It's
Right.
like what I'm in the mood to do can change like so fast.
Yeah, I feel it. Tell me if this seems kind of relatable to you. But this past this past October, I did my own like Inktober's, right? And I was doing a prompt which was drawing like all these kind of like bad guy characters that this guy came up with, right? And he encourages people to redesign his characters, right?
Hmm.
And I did that. I redesigned his characters, but also like the characters he has have like a very loose canon. There's like no real continuity. So I was just making up my own while drawing them, right? And then I realized like I think I have something for a story with this, right? And all the characters I drew, well, the majority of them have designs so different from the original. There might as well just be original characters, right?
Yeah.
So then I just kind of like I came up with like the beginning of a story, and then I came up with the ending of the story. I didn't have a middle, but I just wrote down the ending and just worked my way backwards, right, to how the ending's gonna happen. And then suddenly I have this like outline for like 10 chapters, right, of a
Yeah, that
story.
that that is definitely really relatable. I think it probably relates a little bit to the way I often find something more fun and interesting the if certain rules and limitations have already been laid out, or certain like patterns and stuff, like for what you were just doing, someone else already came up with like a set number of characters with like really loose themes to them, and so you worked within that to come up with something original. And yeah, that's exactly how a lot of things are for me. I find something a lot more fun if I'm not necessarily given total freedom to just do whatever I want to do. Like if there's already an established rule, like this has to be about dinosaurs, or this has to be something with like a robot hero versus like
I
seven demons or something. If there's a pattern to fill in, it's a lot more fun to just see how you and your creativity is going to bend those rules into something that you find exciting.
yeah, because it's kind of like it's like a game almost, like a game you're playing with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, because with my premise, it's kind of like okay, so why do all these like bad guys exist? Like, what's the deal? What caused all of them to exist? And like, they all gotta fight. Why would they all fight each other? What would be the reason, right? Um,
Yeah.
there's this kind of like writing technique that I do that is pretty good at coming up with ideas. Is where I get a sheet of paper and at the top I write down 5 things this story needs to have, right?
Mm.
And then those 5 things I try to pull a story out of me, because like um waiting. Okay, this is how I see it. Waiting for inspiration is very amateur. Like a pro, like could pull out inspiration out of their body. That's how I
Yeah,
see it.
or at least kind of a mix of the two. It's like I think everybody has good ideas in them, but everybody needs that little push, or that little like moment where something like really brings those ideas out.
You need to your brain needs to kind of already be movied for the ideas to come out.
Yeah, and I think that's why people get um a lot of people have such an easier time doing fan art and fan fiction than coming up with their own things. It's that fun and excitement of making something your own, even if it's within, like, even if it's somebody else's idea, or a something, a cliche or a genre that already existed. It's just like, it's looking at something and thinking, well, I like this, but what could I add to it that I would like even more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I get that. That's really. Damn, I was gonna say something. I forgot something about writing. But anyway, oh yeah, before we're probably gonna wrap it up in a couple of minutes. But I would, can you go through the process of how do you make like an update of Awful Hospital? Can you go through the steps for us?
Hmm. Okay. Well, like on like the technical side, I guess it's all really old school, like you said before. I don't use like WordPress or any like publishing software. I just have like text files on my computer with all like they're, like I said, templates that my spouse made for me originally,
Mm-hmm.
which have all the CSS and HTML code. So to make an update for Awful Hospital, I I make the artwork, upload the artwork myself on an FTP program. Then I copy the last update's text file, um, paste it as a new file, change its title, go in and I type in all the images that I'm gonna need. I copy paste all the code it's gonna need, and I change all the dialogue, and then I gotta manually change all the links when I upload a new file. I gotta go back to the last one and change, like, the next and previous links to reflect the new page. I edit the index page. I edit the archive page. I basically do all of it by hand. The way lots of software exists nowadays to do that stuff for you, but I just like to do it the old way. I like how stable it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like for a while, I was thinking of switching over to WordPress to do my articles and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I procrastinated and procrastinated on that. And finally, I procrastinated on it so long that now nobody uses WordPress and hardly, and it doesn't, it's very unstable. It gets a lot of viruses, it gets a lot of malware. So
Yeah.
really it was a better idea to just stick with that old way.
Yeah. Sometimes procrastination does help out like that, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. Okay. And also, I guess, can you talk about like, I guess, how you like write Awful Hospital? Like, I
Um,
imagine you probably read the comments first, right? Or what do you do?
I'll read a lot of the comments and I'll definitely get a lot of inspiration from that. Like, what the commenters are wondering, what they are curious about, what they find cool or funny, and what I think they might enjoy for the next update. But then I also have like my own ideas and plot points and stuff that I want to put in there. So I kind of combine that all together in my head, and I try to come up with something that the commenters will enjoy, that also like moves the situation along at least a little bit more towards the main story. And then yeah, then I just kind of do all the artwork. I use Paint Tool Sai, which is kind of an older program, but I still like it a
I
lot.
hear
I'm real
it's very
comfortable with it.
reliable.
Yeah. And yeah, I do all the art, I upload it, and then I write the dialogue if there is any dialogue on that page. And I always have a rough idea of what it's going to be about, but I don't really plan it too much ahead of time. I just kind of open the file and just start writing as if I'm like in a chat, basically, just kind of made up as I go along. So I guess that's also why it can seem a little sloppy writing wise, because I'm kind of writing the same way that I talk in a conversation or think in a conversation. I
No,
know some people have pointed out that Fern speaks with a lot of just like I'm doing now. She says a lot and and she uses a lot of ellipses in her dialogue, but it's like I can't. It's hard for me to really think of writing natural human dialogue any other way. Like
I
it
feel
would
that.
seem really weird if she always spoke like perfectly eloquent, like she, because people don't
Right,
really talk like a novel.
right, exactly. I think she talks very human, very human core. You know, she's got to find the way she talks. You talk. So you mentioned Paint Tool Side. You mentioned how you wrote it. I think that covers it, right? Wait, when do you update Alpha Hospital?
I used to try and get it updated every single day, but that was really hard to sustain.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
now I update it like whenever I have time. And
Oh boy,
I
yeah,
obviously I wish I could still do like almost daily updates, but sometimes it ends up being like every 2 days to every week or so. It's pretty sporadic.
word. Okay, and how long do you think? When do you think the ending of Alpha Hospital is gonna come?
I'm really not sure, because there have been times I thought I was only like a couple weeks away from a given like story beat, and it wound up coming like after a year.
Oh yeah, I feel it.
But we're definitely like I'd say we're definitely like very close to the most important part of the whole story, which is going to be when Fern is reunited with her son.
Oh
But that's
nice.
actually but that's not going to be the actual end of the comic. I do have like a lot of story for after that I think people are going to find pretty exciting.
Oh damn. I hope it is exciting because sometimes like stories do reach like the I guess the goal that was set at the beginning, and then after that it kind of becomes a little bit of a slog. But hopefully what you got for us isn't that.
Yeah, yeah, like I don't want to overhype anything again, or again, especially because I don't know how long it'll actually take to get there. but like not to be like borderline spoilery, but it's just my favorite thing in a lot of ongoing stories is when the main characters reach that original ultimate goal. You know, they get to like the treasure or the
Yeah.
person they're supposed to rescue, and for whatever reason, that causes just everything to kind of like fall apart and change, just like this
Yeah.
big apocalyptic shift in the status quo.
Right. Actually, no. I think your story actually keeps staying interesting because you built this whole a massive world, right? And it seems like a lot of crazy stuff can happen, you know. So, it would make sense the story wouldn't just end there, you know.
And that's when Bogleech's laptop suddenly ran out of power, right? But it's okay because this was the second recording we made together, and I remember his answer from the last question that I asked him in the first recording. Alright, and that question was, what was some comics he recommends for the audience? He has three, and the three comics he recommend are Hitman for Destiny, Feast for a King, and Ruby Quest. So make sure you check those all out. They're all pretty top tier from the looks of it. I haven't read them yet, but y'all check it out for me. So anyway, yeah, this is like kind of like the abrupt end to the podcast. We tried to record an ending, but like scheduling was just such a problem right now, and he doesn't really mind that it ended like this. But I'd like to bring him on for another time. In the meanwhile, you should go check out bogleech.com and of course Awful Hospital. Both pretty great. I'm going to have the links down there in the comments and in the description. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you like this podcast and you want more episodes where I talk to even more art-related guests. Like and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter. Support the Patreon. You know how it is.